Good morning, students. Today we are discussing the second part of the chapter, the union government and the executive. In the first part, we have discussed about the nominal executive and the real executive and the president, the qualification of the president, tenure, election of the president, how the president also elected by the electoral college, by the single transferable vote system of a proportional representation, impeachment, succession to presidency. These are things we also discuss in the first part of the chapter. Today we are discussing the power and the function of the president. Please see the power and the function of the president. The President of India has executive, legislative, judicial, financial and emergency power. The President enjoys so many powers. They are the executive power, legislative power, judicial, financial and emergency power. Please hear the executive power. Being head of the union executive, the President is the nominal executive. Being head of the union executive, all the administrative decisions are taken in the name of a president. Though president is the head of the union executive, all the administrative decisions, whatever the decisions also taken in the name of the president. And he or she, the president, makes all the important appointments, including those of the Prime Minister, Council of Ministers, Governors, Chief Justice and Judges of the Supreme Court and the High Courts, Comptroller and Auditor General of India and Attorney General of India. Means all high posts are appointed by the advice of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. After election, the general election, the political party which got the majority, the leader of the political party also appointed as Prime Minister. After appointing Prime Minister, other ministers also appointed by the advice of a Prime Minister. That's why the President appointed the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. The President also appointed governors of the states, governors and the Lieutenant General of the Union Territories, Chief Justice and the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court. The President also appointed the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. While appointed the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the President also takes advice on outgoing Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and along with the Prime Minister. And while appointing the judges of the Supreme Court, the President also takes the advice of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And the Chief Justice of the High Courts also are appointed by the President. At that time, the President also takes the advice of the Governor of the concerned state as well as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. In this way, the President also appointed the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, judges of the Supreme Court and Chief Justice of the High Court and the other judges of the High Courts. Then Comptroller and Auditor General of India, Attorney General of India and the Chief of the Defence Staff, the ambassadors of the country, different countries, all the dignitary posts of our country also appointed by the President. These are the power of the executive power of the President. The President also appoints the member of the Election Commission, Finance Commission, etc. She or he is the Supreme Commander of India's Defence Force. The President is the Supreme Commander of the Defence Force. Defence Force means the Air Force, the Army and the Navy. And the Chief of the Air Force, Army and Navy are also appointed by the President. He has the right to be kept informed about all the decisions of the Council of Ministers throughout the Prime Ministers. The President also informed about all the decisions of the Council of Ministers through the Prime Minister. Means the Prime Minister also link between the President and the Council of Ministers. This is the executive power. Then we are going to discuss the legislative power. Please hear. The President is an integral part of Indian Parliament. The President can summon, prorogue and address the two houses of the Parliament. The President has the power to summon, to means to hold the meeting of the joint session, summon and prorogue and addresses the two houses of the Parliament. Every year, the first session of the Parliament begins with her or his address. Every year, the joint session, the first session of the Parliament, means Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, Parliament begins with her or his address. President can dissolve the Lok Sabha before the expiry of its normal term. The President has the legislative power to dissolve the Lok Sabha before its expiry, means normal term, means 5 years. He or she is advised to do so by the Prime Minister. The President dissolves the Lok Sabha by the advice of a Prime Minister. No bill passed by both the House of Parliament becomes a law without her or his consent. The bills passed both the houses, but the bills become a law after the consent of the President. After the signature of the President, the bill which was passed by the both houses then becomes a law after the signature, means after the consent. Prior approval of the President is essential before a money bill introduced in Lok Sabha. Except money bill, other bills also passed in both houses of Parliament, but prior approval is necessary for a money bill to before it is introduced in Lok Sabha. Then, in the legislative power, 12 members of Rajya Sabha are nominated by President from amongst the distinguished persons in the field of art, science, literature, social service, sports, etc. You know that the Rajya Sabha having the 250 members. Out of 250, 238 are elected indirectly. The rest 12 members, they are nominated by the President of the distinguished subjects like art, science, literature, social service, sports, etc. You have heard some film actors, some sports person, they are the member of Rajya Sabha, like Jaya Bachchan, Sachin Tendulkar, they are member of the Rajya Sabha because they are nominated by the President. They are not elected, they are nominated. And she or he can also nominate two Anglo-Indians to the Lok Sabha. You know, the Lok Sabha 545 members. Out of 545, 543 are elected throughout the country directly. And two Anglo-Indian members are nominated by the President. And the nominated members of Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, they are not participating in the presidential election. The two members of Lok Sabha and the 12 members of Rajya Sabha, they are not participating in the presidential election. Then financial power. The annual budget of the country is presented in the Parliament in the name of the President. Every year, the annual budget also prepared by the Finance Ministry, by Finance Department. And the annual budget also introduced or presented in the Parliament in the name of a President. Similarly, all money bills also require his approval before they are introduced in Lok Sabha. All money bills also require approval of the President before introduced in Lok Sabha, because the money bill only introduced in Lok Sabha, not in Rajya Sabha. The president had the power to appoint member of the finance commission. There are so many members of the finance commission also. Finance commission and the members of the finance commission also appointed. And in case certain extraordinary situation also arise, the president can sanction money to the government out of a contingency fund to meet the situation. If any need, suppose the country is also facing a economical crisis, financial crisis, then the president also sanction the money from the contingency fund of a prime president. Okay. Then judicial power. All the judges of a Supreme Court and the High Courts, including their Chief Justice, are appointed by the president. We have discussed in the executive powers also. The judges of a Supreme Court and the Chief Justice of a Supreme Court and other judges of a Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of a High Court and the other judges of a High Court are appointed by the president. But the president also takes advice. And on appeal for mercy, the president had the power to reduce the sentence of a grant, pardon or amnesty. She or he can change the death sentence or can postpone it also. Suppose any criminal, they have the right to appeal the mercy to the president. The president also saw the case, and if he realized that the person should grant some pardon or reduce the sentence, then the president had the power. That's why the president had the power to pardon or reduce the sentences of a criminal. Then emergency power. Okay. The emergency power, please here. In case of extraordinary situation in the country or in some or more states, the president has been entrusted with a certain emergency power. This can happen in 3 situations. In our country, the president has the power to declare emergency for the whole country. In state, the president has the power. The emergency power of the president also divided into 3 categories. That is number 1, the national emergency. If the country's security is threatened by war or external aggression or internal armed rebellion, the president can declare a state of emergency for the whole country. If the security of the country is threatened by the war or external aggression, suppose the other country also attack our country, and the security of the country also destroyed, then at that time the president, after getting the advice of a Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers and the defense forces, then the president had the power to declare the national emergency throughout the country. Then number 2, breakdown of a constitutional machinery in a state. Breakdown of a constitutional machinery in a state. If the government of a state is not being run in accordance with the constitution, if the government of a state is not being run in accordance with the constitution, the president can declare emergency in that state. Means, suppose in a state the government failed to show the majority, then the government could not run properly. Then by the advice of the concerned state's governor, the president can impose the emergency in the concerned state. That is known as the imposition of a president rule in a state. In Jharkhand, many times the president for the imposition of president rule, many times, because in Jharkhand not a single party could not rule 5 years before 2014, because after 2014 the BJP party also formed the government and also continue rule 5 years. But before 2014 in Jharkhand many times the president rule also imposed due to the not a single party could control the government and could continue the 5 years term. Then third, financial emergency. When the financial stability of the country is threatened, the president can declare a state of a financial emergency. If the country's financial stability is threatened, then the president can declare a state of a financial emergency by getting the advice from the Council of Ministers, Prime Minister and the Financial Commission. The emergency power of the president are not absolute. She or he can declare a state of emergency only on the written advice of the Council of Ministers. Please see. The emergency power of the president are not absolute, means the president cannot impose emergency on own will. After getting advice of the Council of Ministers, the concerned state governor, then the president has the power to impose the emergency in a state. Although the position of the President of India is just nominal, the Constitution recognizes her or his position as one of the authority and prestige. Though the President is the nominal head, but our Constitution also recognizes the position of a President as one of the authority and also prestigious position. Dear students, in the part 2 we have discussed these things, and next part we will discuss the rest of the chapter. Thank you. Have a good day.